Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding literacy teacher educator on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast. On this podcast, we explore the power of leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading and notebooks and writing. We lean into our curiosity and creativity and embrace a spirit of lifelong learning to cultivate a life we love. Now, grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate.
Hey everyone, Stephanie here. Welcome to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I want to start today's episode by talking about our reading goals. But first, I want to ask you, do you set personal reading goals? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? Now, I believe first and foremost that a reading life should be enjoyed. But I also believe we can strengthen that enjoyment with personal goals that help us get what we want to get out of our reading life. We might set goals to support our reading habits, like how many books do we want to read? How many minutes do we want to read each day? How many times do we want to sit down with a book? Or how might we access those books? Sometimes we set reading goals that are focused on our reading hearts, like how do we choose what to read? Do we vary how we like to read? Printed books, ebooks, digital books, audiobooks. Or maybe we have a goal for our reading hearts about how we connect the books to our own lives. Sometimes we have reading goals focused on our communities, goals that help us think about how we share books with others, how we share our reviews with others, and who we share them with to help us feel more connected. I actually developed a literate framework that talks about our reading and writing habits, hearts, and communities, because setting these authentic personal goals can really help us move our reading and writing lives forward. So, do any of those goals that I just mentioned resonate with you? By the way, I do have a quiz in the show notes that can help you choose a personal reading goal and decide what your reading life needs next. It's just a fun couple of question quiz that'll help get you thinking about how a personal reading goal can actually make your reading life better. Now, right now, for me, my goals are set on diversifying my reading life because left to my own devices, I will happily read in the same genre, in the same format, by the same author until there are no more books left to read in that category. But that doesn't accomplish what I really want my reading life to do for me, which is to make my actual life better. And so that means I need to read widely. I need to have diverse reading experiences. I need to be opened up to different perspectives and topics to learn. So I set goals around diversifying the genres I read, how I read them, and the authors that I welcome to my TBR stack. And yes, I even keep track of them in a bookish spreadsheet so that I can literally see my goals come to life. If that's something that you're going to nerd out on too, then you can grab my free copy of my reading spreadsheet to make it yours. Now, I love using the calendar to help spark that diversity in my reading life, and this month is Indigenous Peoples Month. So today, I'm going to share 3 books written by Indigenous authors that I think you should read too. I've got 1 picture book, 1 middle grade novel, and 1 young adult text that you won't be sorry you're taking the time to listen to and hopefully pick up. So let's start with the picture book. The picture book I want to share with you today is Fry Bread by Kevin Noble Mallard. It's a Native American family story, and how I loved this book. So fry bread dough is actually a tradition in my family that was started in my childhood, although I am not entirely sure how or why it got there. But basically, you just take these puffs of dough that are fried and then dipped in amazing amounts of cinnamon sugar, and you eat them. My family used to call them galettes, and they used to signify a holiday occasion, especially Halloween. I'm not sure why, because we would kick off our Halloween trick-or-treating with this fried bread dough full of sugar and then head out the door for more. But anyway, that tradition was front and center in my mind as I picked up this book. But it's so much more. This is a beautiful, uplifting, very informative book. And that's why I love it. It tells a story from a perspective about the topic that I didn't know. And now that I do, I can better appreciate it. So this book tells the rich history of fry bread in the Native American tradition, right? So it's more than just telling about how to use a combination of foods to bring a tradition to life. It tells you the story behind it. It tells you how they came to use these new ingredients by these strangers who have come onto their land. And it focuses on how they adapted, how they made this fry bread a celebration of family, of culture, of togetherness, and of survival. The illustrations are absolutely stunning, and they depict Native Americans in all sorts of colors, shapes, and sizes, really dispelling that one-size-fits-all stereotype that some of us might have coming into the book. It shows how family comes together through food, through tradition, through love, through community, and by staying strong together. What I also love about this book is that it gives us a different perspective that we might not have had before reading it. And so it's really important to make sure that those perspectives being portrayed in the books are accurate, and they actually honor the Native American traditions and the Native nations. And so I really rely on Dr. Debbie Reese here, the founder of American Indians in Children's Literature. And I went on to see what she thought of this book, and she absolutely loved it too. I think what was so important is the honor that was brought to the Native nations, to the names of those tribes. They were literally woven into the pages of the book. And I loved that kind of celebration of tradition that's reminding us what's most important and oftentimes overlooked. There was also an extensive author's note at the end too of how you might read this book and use this book with children and in classrooms and in schools, which as an educator, I truly appreciated. Bottom line, this book is beautiful. It's beautiful in illustrations, it's beautiful in the message it shares, and it's beautiful in what happens to the reader as you just let this beautifulness, if that's a word, kind of wash over you from the pages and the food and the family and the tradition. I just loved it. Now, up next, I want to share a middle grade novel with you called The Barren Grounds by David A. Robertson. Now, I read this book as part of a Choice Literacy Book Club a couple of months ago, and I'm so glad I did. Now, this is not a book that I would have typically picked up because it is so easy for me to stay in my own reading ruts because I'm happy there. But this book club forced me to step out of that reading comfort zone a bit. And that is what I love about book clubs, because they get you to read books that you might not have normally gravitated to. Now, I'm not one that typically leans into fantasy elements in a book, but honestly, I loved them here. These characters were so real and relatable in the beginning of the book that followed a very typical realistic fiction plotline. So when that plotline shifted and we started to bring in those fantasy elements, I was all in. So let me read to you the inside flap to give you an overview of what this book is about, because I think it does it so beautifully here. Morgan and Eli, two Indigenous children forced away from their families and communities, are brought together in a foster home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. They each feel disconnected from their culture and from each other, and they struggle to fit in at school and at their new home until they find a secret place walled off in an unfinished attic bedroom. A portal opens to another reality, Oski, bringing them onto frozen, barren grounds where they meet Ochek, also known as Fisher. The only hunter supporting his starving community, Mizowa, Ochek welcomes the human children, teaching them traditional ways to survive. But as the need for food becomes desperate, they embark on a dangerous mission. Accompanied by Arik, a sassy squirrel they catch stealing from the trapline, they try to save Mizowa before the icy grip of winter freezes everything, including them. There is so much in this book to unpack. We have the topic of foster care and what it means to be a foster child and what it means to be a person surrounding foster children who love them and want to help. It's a book about found family, a book about emerging friendship. It's certainly a book with a lot of fantasy elements, but characters that we can completely relate to, including the animals themselves. It's a book about bonds that tie us together. And what I loved most is that it's a book that teases us into thinking about what else might exist out there. To believe in something outside of ourselves that we might not see, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the lessons from those fantastical animals actually had really powerful human implications. And that's what I loved most about this book, because to me, that was very unexpected, but something that I was certainly embracing at the end. So that's The Barren Grounds by David A. Robertson. Now, my third book to share is a young adult selection, but it's a young adult selection I know that many adults have adored as well, and that's Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley. Now, this was a Reese Young Adult Book Club pick, and I can absolutely see why. This book is about 18-year-old Donis Fontaine. Now, Donis feels like she has never quite fit in, not in her hometown, not on her reservation, and she just has always felt that she has been between two worlds. She has dreamed of starting college and figuring everything out, but unfortunately, tragedy strikes and some home relationships need tending to. So she doesn't go away to college. And soon after, she witnesses a friend's murder at home, and her life, predictably, starts to unravel. She's left to care for her fragile mother. She's left to worry about her grandmother, and she unexpectedly ends up as part of an FBI investigation into a drug ring in her community. Now, as you can imagine, being connected to the FBI as some sort of secretive mission is hard for her to deal with. But we learn that her character, what she's made of, leads her way. We learn about her new friend, Jamie, her new hockey friend, Jamie, that is there by her side. And we learn how she takes her roots in family and tradition and the legacy that brings. We learn how she ends up paving her own way. And not only does she support the FBI and their pursuit, but she uncovers a whole lot more that needs to be tended to. So this book will just immerse you in Donis's journey. It will literally keep you on your toes, trying to figure out what is happening, what is coming next, how Donis's family ties are connected, where her choices are going to lead her for better or for worse, and what good and uncomfortable is she going to uncover, and then what is she going to do about it? That's really what's happening in this book. This book will immerse you in the rich culture. It will help you explore Donis's family roots and, of course, help you think about your own. And it will just envelope you in this culture and tradition that sustains Donis's journey and helps you think about how your own might do the same for you. It's a book that you just can't help but diving deep into with those unexpected twists and turns. And as you close that last page, you do get a nice sense of full circle kind of closure, and certainly end up being a better person for having read this book. I love it. Now, we've discussed 3 books today: Fry Bread, The Barren Grounds, and Firekeeper's Daughter. Now, how can we connect this theme, 3 books by Indigenous authors, to our actual life to make our actual lives better? Well, the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you borrow a little bit of my personal reading goals and you diversify your reading life too. Maybe you diversify the genres you read, the format you read them in, or the authors that you gravitate towards. But I highly recommend, of course, that you pick up one of these books. But if not one of these, go out and do some research. Is there a book by an Indigenous author that interests you, that you know you might want to read to help celebrate during this month? Read them. Lift those authors up. Lift their voices up so others know that they're out there, so that they can tell their story and that we can learn from the words that they have been sharing. I mean, that's the way we make the world a better place. We expand our mind, we expand our thinking, and I believe that that starts with the books we read. So I hope you consider that this week and you look at your current TBR stack and see how you might shake it up a bit to really honor the voices that are telling their stories. Now, I'd love to know what books you bring into your TBR stack, so you can find me online at @finitolit on your favorite social media platform. But if you haven't joined us on Facebook yet, I do have a Facebook group for this podcast where we share all things related to reading and writing and learning and growing. Just head to Facebook, search for the Get Literate community, and click to join. All you have to do is tell me about a book that you've read recently, something you're hoping to get out of the group, and you're in. And we can continue the conversations about these books and others that you recommend there in that community. So thanks for listening to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. And I wish you lots of happy, diversified reading.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life there, like book lists, notebooking ideas, personalized book recommendations, and an invitation to join my Get Literate Patreon community. Each month, we take a deep dive into one bookish theme and work to bring it to life in our own lives. You'll get bonus episodes, book calendars, live book club and notebooking sessions, special events, and much, much more. You can find more about the Get Literate Patreon community at getliterate.co. And one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or just take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and no bookish community too. Thanks for listening.